Kia ora koutou, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Aye.
Excellent. So yeah, you'll see from our submission that there really are two main objections to the bill. The first objection relates to the bill's connection to the legal needs of rangatahi Māori. Our job as a community law centre is to reduce legal harm in the community and reduce the number of legal issues and target resources as efficiently as possible. Being young and being Māori is one of the key indicators of legal harm in the community, and young Māori make up 63% of the most vulnerable group of young people in the community who will experience high legal needs. The types of issues that they face are connected to socio-economic disadvantage, which is itself connected to the impact of colonisation. And legal issues that young Māori face include such things as unlawful exclusion from school, barriers to housing and barriers to accessing social security. So pretty fundamental rights and benefits that young people should be able to access. Now, we believe this bill will reduce access to justice for young Māori, essentially by limiting the jurisdiction of the court to consider the impact of colonisation and te tiriti breaches, etc. So that's our first objection. The second objection really goes to the constitutional nature, I guess, of te tiriti or Waitangi. In my lifetime, the relationship between Māori and the Crown has changed immensely. Tangata whenua have and continue to make great strides in throwing off the burden of colonisation. And while there is a long way to go, in my reckoning, the future for tangata whenua appears extremely bright, and this is something that we should be celebrating. We're not surprised that this bill, I guess, has come up. It's really, we're not surprised by the pushback, I guess, to the advances that tangata whenua has made, but we think it's a fundamental breach of the treaty and a really simplistic response to what is a really complex problem, which is the relationship between tangata whenua and the Crown in a constitutional and liberal democracy. Our view is that young people deserve better from our parliamentarians than what they've got through this bill, and the fact that it's even made it to this stage of the House processes. Young people deserve a proper conversation about the place of te tiriti or Waitangi in our democracy. We've heard the word race used in relation to these issues. We think young people do deserve a conversation about race in Aotearoa, but it needs to be one that faces with courage and honesty the impact of colonisation on Indigenous communities. And this bill is not a conversation about the place of te tiriti in our community, in our constitution, and it's not an honest conversation about race and other issues around colonisation. We understand it's complex, working te tiriti into our constitution. It raises issues about sovereignty of parliament. We have heard in the commentary about this that it is uncertain, not knowing what the treaty means and how it fits. But that's what relationships are like, and young people deserve a government who will lead a conversation about these things and continue the work of its predecessors, which were those who convened the 2011 Constitutional Advisory Panel. That's the sort of process which should be used to look at constitutional change and to look at how te tiriti fits within our constitution. We've seen a lot of confusion and scaremongering about te tiriti and how it fits, but this is not a novel concept, and we see businesses, sports team boards, families. Those are all examples within the community where power is shared. There's co-governance happening. There's complex governance arrangements at play, and we make it work. Our view is that we just haven't been very good at actually explaining what's going on in relation to te tiriti or Waitangi and bringing people along on that journey. I think we need a different metaphor. We're all familiar with the nuclear family, where two parents work together for the best interests of their children, and every child flourishes. That is a metaphor, I think, that could work for our conversations about te tiriti and how it fits within our constitution. Our view is that this bill is not an attempt by Parliament to address these complex issues. Why it can't be an honest attempt, because the ACT Party has essentially agreed to peace in the coalition agreement, knowing that it wouldn't get past the first reading. So it can't be an honest attempt to really address these issues. We think it's simple politics at play, and it's not appropriate when dealing with complex constitutional issues like this. Our view is that as parliamentarians and as select committee members, your job's to go back to the executive and the party whips and tell them that we want something better, and that's what we think young people are entitled to. Kia ora, it's our submissions.
Kia ora, Darren, and thank you for the work that you do for our young people in New Zealand. I'll start with the first question from Takata first, then Todd, and then Tim Paul.
Tēnā koe, Darren, ngā mihi o te ata ki a koe me o mahi. My experience in the House in a year that's gone is that there's a significant knowledge gap when it comes to dealing with the treaty in the House. I hear the complexity that you're speaking about, and ultimately you're driving us towards the impact, intended or unintended, on rangatahi. We sort of advocate that MPs should have to have a prerequisite level of knowledge about the treaty and the history before being allowed to come in. And so to get to a place that you're speaking about, a place where the debate on te tiriti or Waitangi is more helpful and quality, what do you think Parliament might do in terms of its structure and how it operates to improve that?
I think, it's a really interesting question. I think that, I mean, there's certain things that any workplace should be doing. I think given our constitution at the moment, you don't need that knowledge to become an MP, but certainly, your job as an MP primarily as a parliamentarian is to write good laws, and so I think parliamentarians need the tools to write good laws. I'm a lawyer. I've worked in the front line of community law centres for 20 years. We see day in, day out the impact of bad laws. So I think there's definitely, I think that at the very least, there's an answer to your question which is quite narrow in scope, which is the job, it's essentially an employment kind of issue. But in terms of the constitutional issues, I think that this is a conversation that we need to have. I'm Pakeha. I am scratching the surface in my knowledge of te tiriti and how it fits within Māoridom. It's not for me to say, I think, what sort of training is required. I think it's a conversation we need to have together and come up with the answers to your question collectively. I think that's the promise that we made when we formed the partnership that we did 100 and however many years ago it is.
Thanks, Darren. We'll go to Todd Stevenson and then Tampa.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you for making your submission. In your remarks, you mentioned that the treaty leads us to complex governance arrangements and co-governance. I'm paraphrasing, but you mentioned those things.
Yeah.
So is it your submission then that the treaty does deliver different rights based on ancestry?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tampa.
Kia ora, Darren. Nice to see you again, everyone. I saw Darren yesterday submitting on the Bird Camp Bill, another bad one, another bad law. What do you mean in plain language when you say in your submission, increase the probability that rangatahi Māori will experience increased legal harm? Can you just explain to the people what you mean by legal harm?
It's quite complex, but lack of accountability is an issue for young people. So young people are very unlikely to make complaints in a legal context. So, for example, if they are unlawfully excluded from school, they just don't challenge those decisions. And what that means is that essentially that the unlawfulness, the structures around how young people access justice leads to harm, as do bad laws themselves.
Nice,
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you, Darren. And perfect timing. Thank you for your submission this
Well,
morning.
thank you for the opportunity.
Spending your time with us. We're going to move to our submission now from Te Hungaroa Māori o Aotearoa. And
Okay. Love Stacey's comment here. The interesting concept of treating it like a nuclear family.
Yeah. So the two big questions that I took away is that there is a knowledge gap in the House. Should MPs have an understanding of the treaty and the current conflicts? Personally, I think yes. And does the treaty deliver different rights based on ancestry? No, because this is an agreement between two governing bodies, in particular Hapu, Iwi being one group and the government, the Crown being the other group. So no, no. I agree with the lawyer on that one.
Right.
Because it's not an agreement between races; it's an agreement between two governing agencies.
I still despise the term race itself. I would rather say ethnicity or culture or heritage. But I would have said, yeah, everything he said was good. So tell me what might be wrong with it.
Yeah, I mean, put it this way. The treaty is not an agreement between individual Māori and individual Pākehā, right? It's an agreement between, again, two governing bodies where you've got the government and you've got rangatira, who are the representatives of their iwi and hapu, coming together to say, okay, we're going to have shared participation here, and this is we're going to allow you, the Crown, to establish a government here, so you can essentially establish your own tikanga for Pākehā settlers. That's what this treaty is about. It came about in part due to my ancestors being attacked by Te Rauparaha.
I feel like even as a child, I was. That's how it felt to me. I don't know what I don't feel particularly educated on the subject, especially. I mean, my dad might have known a lot, but it's not what we were talking about. Partly because those on the side of obviously what it means are just kind of agree we're in cooperation.
Yeah.
I was dimly aware that we've got 100 years of reparation and relearning stuff, but typically I was like, everywhere I went, Māori values were included, and I loved it.
And I think it's possibly the point of when you're educated as well. Like you and I think Laura were pretty much like went through the education system through the 90s and the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So we were that first generation that got the new education, but we're also the generation where you had the parents who possibly didn't value the context behind it.
Well, my upbringing is a little bit different to you two. I didn't go to state school. I was homeschooled. So I was completely isolated from much of anything to do with Māoridom. I didn't learn this stuff until I attended Te Wānanga o Aotearoa, where I began reading up on the history. I didn't even know what my whakapapa was until I went through that system, through higher
Sure.
education.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting the part about Māori tend to not question it when they are done wrong by, and that is something that, as anyone knows that grinds my gears here, is wins, because that is so common that you can the group of people who typically are wronged, a government department that does that is like Work and Income or Aotearoa Tamariki, where they don't follow procedures because they're not used to being challenged. And then when they get challenged, it becomes the belittling of but I'm in the wrong, but I'm going to belittle you as if I'm right approach, which doesn't really fix the problem because a wrong is still a wrong.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, News Guide, the Order Paper Podcast.